sometime growing up, how many of you slept with a teddy bear at night? Raise your hand. Specifically a teddy bear, okay? Okay, how many of you grew up sleeping with any other stuffed animal? It didn't have to be a teddy bear, or maybe it was a different type of toy. How many of you? Raise your hand. Okay. Now, how many of you were extremely independent children? You didn't need anything besides a blanket and a bed to sleep in at night in order to go to sleep. Raise your hand. All right. Now, how many of you still sleep with a stuffed animal or toy at night? Raise your hand. Don't be ashamed. Okay, it's okay. Because sleeping with certain objects, they can bring comfort to you at night, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just a few years ago, rather than a teddy bear, I slept with a tennis racket at night. You know, it kind of brought me the same type of comfort that sleeping with those types of objects and stuffed animals brought you. My tennis racket made me feel like I was powerful even when I was going to sleep. It made me feel like I could protect myself and end my suffering by fighting back with my tennis racket the next time I received a late night visit. Let me officially introduce myself. My name is Taylor Amari Little. I am 17 years old, and I am one of many survivors of sexual abuse. For me, it happened consistently for about 2 years. And I knew what was happening to me. I knew that it was wrong. I even confided in a few friends about it because I was lonely and I needed someone to talk to. However, I was scared because I thought I was protecting my family if I didn't tell. I didn't want them to find out because I thought I would ruin my family if they knew. And so, thinking that I was protecting their happiness, I kept my mouth shut and I kept myself vulnerable, and I kept it all bottled in. Although the abuse stopped about 2 years, although it ended a few years ago, it still affects me every day, whether I'm at school, whether I'm at work, whether I'm by myself. And actually, recently I realized a pattern about myself. When I am very upset, when my emotions are high, I begin to experience flashbacks. And although it may sound very awful, I'm not broken about it. Not anymore. What I wish to explain today is that he only touched certain parts of me, yet I began to hate all of me. And this actually brings me to the first half of my TED Talk title, Abuse, Infuse, Reclaim. In this context, abuse describes external conflict, psychological, emotional, physical harm being inflicted on someone. Infuse describes the internal conflict and stress that follows the abuse. It's really a journey that one endures consisting of attempts at coping with that external conflict. And it's not uncommon for self-hate and a lot of negativity to be infused into that journey. Lastly, reclaim describes the healing process. It describes the most beneficial results of the internal conflict. And that healing process is a different length for everyone. And together, all of these steps equate to the second half of the title, Revolutionary Self-Produced Justice, which will be explained momentarily. So you briefly heard and imagined my abuse stage. My infuse stage, it consisted of so much self-hate. I trusted so many staff members at all of the schools that I went to, yet I was not ignorant to the fact that if I told any of the staff there that by law they would be obligated to report it. So I confided in them about everything else and danced around that secret, keeping it bottled in. Keeping it bottled in was my secret. It was my talent also, and also keeping it bottled in led to me experiencing many suicidal thoughts for the very first time. Beginning freshman year in high school, I was in a new environment, and by then, the secret was out to my family. Yet I was still dealing with a lot of the same feelings. And in order to deal with all of these emotions, I began trying to ignore my emotional pain by inflicting physical pain. I began self-harming, I began cutting and burning certain parts of my body, and the physical marks that I created, it was my outlet. They were my outlet. Finally, I felt that I had control over something. However, this did not solve any of my problems. It only temporarily distracted me from them. The main problem was that I hated myself. I hated myself, and one moment, even small things such as brushing my teeth and getting dressed in the morning, those became moments that I dreaded at night or in the morning. I remember incidents of me crying while preparing to brush my teeth in the morning, simply because I'd caught a glance at myself in the mirror on accident and I hated my body too much to look at it. Similar to other survivors of sexual abuse, I viewed my body as something to feel guilty over, something that was dirty, something that had been contaminated without permission, therefore no longer of any value. And this also hindered my journey with loving my blackness because as a young black girl, I was not encouraged or socialized to appreciate my skin color, so this situation hindered me further. I associated zero value or beauty with my physical appearance, so of course my skin color was perceived the same way by me as well. They said, tell, so I told, that justice isn't old. He surely served some time. He was no friend of mine. The person who abused me served no time for what he did. The police claimed not to have enough evidence, paired with the fact that he managed to skip state the same week that my mother found out. Sometimes I still experience internal conflict, like fear. Sometimes I fear that he will return to Michigan and find me as revenge for telling someone. And despite this, with the help of occasional group therapy and that I used to attend and writing about it, I realized I was not the only person out there experiencing such shame, negativity, and guilt. I realized I was not the only person experiencing these things, and my life began to get easier. I began to heal. Today, I finally understand that my body is mine and it was never his to begin with. Today, I understand that I can love my body more than he ever did. As I said before, the person who abused me served no time. A majority of people are able to recognize that this justice system is indeed flawed. This country was founded on oppressive structures specifically meant to protect certain groups, so as a result of that, there are guaranteed to be groups left with disadvantages. Often in situations of oppressive dynamics like this, there is no compensation, no justice, no reparations, no nothing for people of marginalized communities. So when we reclaim ourselves after once losing ourselves to such harm, in a sense, we provide justice for ourselves, justice that we were not able to receive from society. Too often, laws and our society will not help your situation, and sometimes even the people closest to you, like your family, can contribute to the harm that you experience. So your own strength must be developed during your infuse stage so that you can begin the reclaim stage and finally take whatever that was taken from you back, for example, your happiness. And of course, I'm not the only case of self-produced justice. It happens all the time, unfortunately, and more credit must be given to anyone who has suffered from any form of abuse, whether directly from society or whether from products of society, because we are not victims, we are survivors. And it's about time the rest of society catches up and recognizes us for who we are. Embracing who you are is absolutely a revolutionary process. When something or someone can easily impact you, that something or someone has a power over you. So when you endure harm from this power and then reclaim yourself afterwards, there is a transition. Power shifts from that something or someone to yourself because you take that power that they once held over you and you claim it for yourself unapologetically, and that is how you know that you have come a long way. That is how you know you have begun to heal. And allow me to provide another example of self-produced justice. One of my closest friends is African American and from a poor background just like me. We discuss politics all day, every day. Why? Because as much as we hate it, politics affect every part of our lives. We're very underprivileged in many ways, as much as we hate it, and sometimes it just becomes too much to bear. Now, race is one of the topics that we really talk about every day and think about every day. So naturally, one of the things that I personally get often is, why do you talk about blackness so much? Why do you talk about racism so much? That's all you talk about. That's all you think about. Why? But I try to understand that they are unaware of how much I have gone through in order to become who I am today. How much it has taken me to finally be able to not hate the natural state of my hair, my skin color, the way my people speak, anything associated with blackness. Regarding blackness, it is something that my friends and I are extremely proud of. Now, when anti-blackness is taught from birth, it takes a significant amount of effort to unlearn it all and embrace who we are. And this is why I'm grateful for all of the natural hair movements and the black empowerment movements that are noticeably returning to the United States and all over the world. Why I'm grateful for when other communities of color reclaim things that they are also told to be ashamed of. For example, the bindi, what many Hindu Indian women often wear in the center of their foreheads. It holds cultural and religious significance. I remember when my friend from India, she told me about when she used to wear the bindi every day, but she stopped after a while because she was being teased and bullied for it at school once she and her family had moved to the suburbs. But then she spoke of her frustration and confusion because what she was once teased for is now seen as fashionable and trendy by mainstream media after being popularized by white celebrities. She asked me questions like, well, why do they get to openly embrace my culture that they barely know about, but I can't? It's cultural appropriation, which is the taking of intellectual property, of intellectual knowledge, and cultural expressions from someone else's culture and out of its original context. It's usually seen as treating other identities as costumes or fashion accessories rather than part of a group's culture. My friends who are of color and we joke all the time about common experiences that many children of color share. For example, things that are not even funny, like cultural assimilation rather than appropriation. Although none of my close friends and I grew up together, we reminisce about the desire to bleach our skin and change the way we spoke in order to assimilate and become more respectable in society. We just joke to make things easier for ourselves. We figure there has to be some type of humor and positivity out in the world to distract us from all of the hate that we receive. And so when you ask why I'm so vocal about my blackness and about racism, it's because I have reclaimed myself after discovering my power to empower myself. It's because I realized that I don't have to continue suffering from the psychological anti-black torture that our society encourages. If society won't empower me, I'll empower me, and that's how it's going to be. We can't continue to let people who have struggled so much in the past not be themselves and embrace who they are today. People don't need any permission from you to love themselves unconditionally. For example, fat acceptance movements exist, so let them. What so many people don't understand is when plus size people finally come to embrace themselves and embrace their size and turn it into a movement, it's not to promote overweightness and eating unhealthily. It's simply because they wish to remove the cultural stigmas that have been placed against fatness in the first place that cause so much psychological, physical, and emotional harm. When are people going to stop associating the word fat with the word ugly? We don't even realize it, but it's ingrained in the way we speak. If someone says, I'm so fat, or I look fat, usually the response is, no, you're not, you're gorgeous, or no, you're not, you look great. But who said being fat or plus size is synonymous with ugly? Now think about the implications of that on those who are bigger. It encourages harm, it encourages self-hate, pushing more towards the infuse stage. And that's a form of abuse from society. Now let me give you another example. For those who complain about flamboyant men and masculine women and say things like, oh, why can't they just dress or act normal? One, there is never a normal, there is only what is common and what is not. In this context, dealing with social concepts, normal implies the standard in that anything outside of that standard is wrong. When in reality, regardless of how different something is or how common a certain way of doing something is, all of the ways of doing something should generally be respected unless somehow causing harm upon someone else. Two, what makes you ask questions like, why can't they just dress or act normal? Why does the way they express themselves, something that should not concern you in the first place, bring you such discomfort? Why should they have to change the way they express themselves in terms of appearance and in terms of mannerisms? I despise when people ask these types of questions because they're just like the questions I mentioned before. Why do you talk so much about blackness and about racism? Why should we have to tone down the way we express ourselves? Because you're scared? Melanin is ancient, yet you acting like it ain't shit. Say it's not respectable enough for corporations. Temptation to really test my patience. You said her name is Ghetto, so instead you say she nameless. I'm not surprised you never cease to dehumanize ignorant to your own ignorance more. I realize it's not okay, but you think you're not racist. Just because you're not hanging folks don't erase this. It's more subtle, changed over the years. Mass incarceration just added to your fears. Look, I'm all ears, but one thing that I know, you can't try to justify murder. That's a no. For such a long time, I sacrificed and murdered appreciation for my cultural heritage in order to please standards of society by assimilating and becoming more white. For such a long time, many flamboyant men and masculine women sacrifice who they are in order to please standards of society by pretending to be and dressing like people who they are not. And although these examples seem so different from one another, in actuality, they share the same core: abuse, infuse, reclaim. After suffering from various types of abuse, such as shaming, physical and emotional abuse inflicted by society and products of society, our lives were infused with self-hate and counterproductivity. And if us being ourselves is it causes so much discomfort, then maybe it's your time to sacrifice your closed-mindedness and your comfort zone and recognize a little thing in this world that we call diversity. Once we reclaim who we are after being forced to suppress it for such a long time, that's it. We're done. Let us produce our own justice in a world where many racist cops walk free, where many transgender women, especially of color, are killed every day, where women are shamed for expressing their sexuality in their own way after constantly being told that we cannot be sexual beings, and if we could, it was only when men let us. In a world where many differently able people suffer from physical and mental disabilities and illnesses, yet we like to pretend their problems don't exist. And a world where people who follow no religion at all or choose not to conform, rather than simply inheriting beliefs without question, are shamed and they're ostracized for believing what they choose to believe. Relative to the rest of the world, so few people actually fight to stop these abuse and infuse stages from happening in the first place. And the lack of justice and comfort that we receive after suffering harm from external forces is too powerful. Knowing this, the inspiring educator and activist Kim Catherine Milan, she once spoke about the power of selfies. Bear with me for a moment. Growing up, she was verbally and physically chastised by her mother's boyfriend, who was very shameful and misogynistic towards women. She describes him as being a very religious man who believed that women were the source of sin. He abused her mother, called her a whore because he believed that she was too friendly with other people. And so he also threatened Kim growing up many times, saying not to become a whore like her mother. Kim had also been sexualized since she first began developing breasts and curves at a young age. Her mother's boyfriend often blamed a lot of the abuse that Kim faced on herself, as if her body could actually solely provoke violence. For such a long time, she felt ashamed for just existing. She tried so hard to hide her body after that. She said that she worked hard for people to not capture her existence, even on camera. She avoided pictures, huge moments like prom. She stopped looking in the mirror. For such a long time, she was stuck in the infuse stage, stuck dealing with all of this internal conflict after suffering so much external conflict. She spoke about how today she takes selfies all the time now. It's a part of her healing process. It's a part of her reclaimed stage. And honestly, that's how many people of marginalized communities have the right to feel. People who have been shamed for merely existing. And yes, maybe all of your validation that you receive should not strictly depend on social media, but often there is a benefit that is ignored. Taking selfies and sharing them with the world is just a small yet huge action that provides validation that many people don't have for majority of their lives. So often people suffer from constant invalidation, just like her, just like us, and they barely survive. So especially when you have identities that usually go unrepresented in the media, listen, you have the right to take as many selfies as you want. Everyone deserves to be seen. Everyone deserves to be heard. Everyone deserves to be in control of their image and in control of themselves. Reclaim yourself. There's a quote that goes, "In a society that profits from your self-doubt, liking yourself is a rebellious act. If society won't empower you, you empower you. Produce your own justice." Thank you.